Explain this to me.
This is one that hits close to home for me because a lot of my academic research focuses.
And this is I forget that this is going to be a podcast probably too. So let's describe the slides here. Yeah.
What people are seeing. So this is about the Māori people of New Zealand trying to save their language from big tech. And, again, a lot of my academic research focused on, a lot of it was historical linguistics, but one of my main research focuses is language retention and language loss in immigrant and diaspora communities. And because of that, underserved languages, under-resourced languages are really interesting to me, and what those communities are doing to save those languages. Now, the thumbnail sketch of this story is that basically there is a growing wealth of data about the Maori language that's being gathered. And some tech companies have approached the Maori groups and organizations that are gathering this data to say, hey, why don't you sell us some of it? Or, hey, you speak Maori, we'll pay you $45 an hour, I think was the price that I saw, if I recall correctly, to give us some samples of your language, spoken samples of your language for speech recognition. And that's
like audio recording.
Right, okay. Exactly. Now, what's the problem with this?
Well, which is super interesting. Like I've worked on projects like that before, where someone's trying to train a multilingual engine, so they need stuff to train it with.
Yep,
right.
Exactly.
And so typically they'll throw that at their supply chain. They'll throw that to their vendors, and there's vendors out there that specialize just in this, right? Like I know Pactera Edge, right across the water from me here in Seattle area. They do a lot of that work where they're just tagging metadata and training engines and stuff like that. But they also need to find the content.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. No, if you don't have the data, you can't train the machine. That's how it works. I mean, you can sort of liken it to the human language learning process. If you don't have input to learn the language, you're not going to be able to learn it. That's just how these things go.
Yep.
So that's completely legit. The question sort of becomes then, and it's a multi-layered question, who should profit off of this? Because nobody owns a language, right? I mean, perhaps the native speakers of that language can be but
people may disagree with that, because I see that as the question that keeps coming up. Is we're talking about this question of, can a language be owned by somebody?
Maybe I'm wrong on that. Maybe it can. My instinct is to say the community of native speakers or people who live their lives, for the most part in that language, are the owners of it. But I'm open to arguments on the other side about that. I'm not even sure if language is ownable, though.
I'm not sure either. Well, I mean, I don't think there is a right answer, right? Yeah. And I'm open to arguments. As you said, I was like, yeah, I'm open to arguments, but I'd rather have discussions than arguments.
You're right.
Because I don't think this is, because I think there are people out there arguing about this, and they feel very passionately about this, and good for y'all, right? Like, good. Everyone's got a cause, right? But it's fascinating because people don't see it all the same way. And you would never see this. You never see, France saying, no, Microsoft can't use the French language. We can't have access to our language and stuff like that. But that's a good point of clarification, though. Are they saying they can't use the language, or are they saying that they can't have access to our data that we've meticulously collected? Because that's it, right?
And that, I think, is what we're getting into. And I think so. Two things here. One, I think we need to make a really, really clear distinction, because there's few things that frustrate me more when talking about a contentious subject than people not being clear about what they say means. We need to make a really clear distinction between ownership or ownability, because again, I feel like it's an open question whether a language is ownable or not, and commodifiability. I think of it like this. Nobody owns oxygen, right? Oxygen is just there and we breathe it. But you can commodify oxygen. If you compress it in a canister, you can sell that. You can sell the compressed air, the compressed oxygen to somebody. So it's commodifiable, but it's not necessarily owned, really. And then whether it's ownable or not, I think sort of gets into maybe a gray area there. The argument here is not necessarily saying, no, you don't get to have this, so much as, well, I think the companies that have gathered it saying you don't get to have what we've gathered, but they're also saying, hey, when you go into our community and offer $45 an hour or whatever for somebody to give you that data, that you're then going to turn around and sell back to us, that's a problem. So it's who is profiting off of it, I think, is really the central question here. And I think it's more of a live issue, to go to your France example. The French, with the exception of in Canada, I will say, have to be fair about that, but the French have generally not had to worry about their linguistic resources being taken advantage of by somebody more powerful.
They've got a few backup markets speaking their language. I mean, an asteroid could hit Paris today, and there'd still be countries all around the world speaking French. And I know asteroids don't. Okay.
Nobody's wishing this will happen. We're just saying. No, you're right, though. Like France, let's say it like this. France as a country could cease to exist. Again, another thing that we're not wishing for. But France as a country, you're right, could cease to exist. And that would not spell oh, no,
that was I forget.
Take that smoke,
Bob Drake's not on this call. I have like a knee-jerk reaction. I have to make fun of France when Bob Drake's in the room. And he's normally on these calls just because he gets so worked up. I love the French.
I know. Hey, here's the thing. Bob and I met in France because my degree is in French, and we were going to school there.
We have a lot of French speakers here.
But even if France didn't exist, there would be plenty of French spoken in the world. Yeah. So this is
really archives, electronic and otherwise. Like the language is not at
literature risk. And that's the thing. This is more of a live issue for language communities that have been marginalized or minoritized in the past, that have been subject to punitive measures by larger powers. Maori school children, much like Aboriginal school children in Australia, much like Indigenous children here in the Americas, were beaten for speaking their language. Yeah. So until laws were passed, sometimes in living memory of a lot of people, to finally outlaw those practices. So this is essentially the Maori saying, hey, you beat us for speaking our language 50 years ago, and now you want to pay us a bare fraction of what you're actually going to make off of our language because you realize that it can be commodified. Is that really the right thing to do? So in a way, it's an argument about language. It's an argument about culture, but it's at its core, I think, an argument about historical and current
power.
Entrenched. Exactly.
It's about power.
That's what I was going to say. It's power.
Sorry,
it's about power structure.
I had to one up you and exert my power by beating you to the punchline.